What if we lived in a world where it was impossible to miss the bus? A world where the bus always showed up. Hi, I'm Sarah LaBrecque, and this is the Purpose Pioneers from Positive News. In this podcast, I meet the leaders of some of the UK's most inspiring organizations to uncover how they're turning their ideals into action. In each episode, we'll explore 3 defining moments that reveal their journey of putting purpose into practice. The Purpose Pioneers is supported by Triodos Bank. So today, I have Keith Bradbury joining me. Welcome to the podcast, Keith.
Thanks, great to be here.
So Keith is the co-founder of Ember, the UK's first intercity electric bus company, which operates in Scotland. So Keith, can you tell me more about Ember? What is it and how does it differ from other bus companies?
It's always difficult to start with a succinct description of Ember because on the face of it, we are exactly what you described. We are the UK's first all-electric intercity coach operator. But really what that means and what we think of Ember as internally is that we are a tech business that is rebuilding middle distance public transport. And in order to do that, we've taken on kind of the multiple challenges of building complete new software stack. We build and own and operate our own charging hubs, which are kind of purpose-built hubs, high-speed charging for large vehicles. And then we also own and operate a large fleet of electric coaches, which is kind of growing all the time. From the first 2 vehicles, actually, that were funded by Triodos 5 years ago to the fleet now, which is over 100 and is set to grow actually very quickly this year.
So you're tackling buses, transport from various infrastructure points of view, and you've kind of built it from the ground up.
Yeah. So I guess the background to it is that, Pierce and I, my co-founder and I, we've been bus passengers for kind of all of our lives, and we've traveled on buses on every continent, and we've kind of seen what good and bad can look like. And we've also spent time working in kind of other industries because we're not actually from this industry. So we were working in fintech. We were seeing the advancement of kind of those fintech companies, how they were improving the passenger experience, the tech experience. They were building kind of these modern tech-enabled businesses to really give consumers this better proposition, a better product proposition. And we thought, well, why can't you do that for buses? But to do that for buses, as you say, it's not enough to just go and buy and operate an electric coach or an electric bus. You need to kind of be thinking to yourself, what does it take to actually rebuild the entire stack from the ground up so that you're not making an incremental change or an incremental improvement. You're really changing the kind of the fundamental economics and the fundamental product proposition, which is then giving people the incentive to use your product. And that's why we've taken on so much. In many ways, we've got 3 businesses all rolled into one. We've got a software business with a big team of developers. We've got a big driver team and maintenance team that's looking after our vehicles and serving passengers. We've got a construction team, and we work with the architects and planning to be able to get all of these sites through, because we're effectively taking a brown piece of land. It could just be a corner of a field, or it could just be an empty plot. And we're turning it into a purpose-built hub with, as far as I know, the fastest charging available in the UK. And we're doing all of that, integrating all of those pieces together to get the advantage so that your chargers can speak to your vehicles, can speak to your system, can speak to your drivers, can speak to your ops team. And as you put all of those things together, that's where you see the benefit of what we call a full stack business.
Do you think that the coach industry needed to be approached this way in order to improve? Because to be honest, it has a bit of a bad reputation, hence my intro.
So I think that's very fair. I guess as a bus and coach passenger, I can remember the times when I was traveling every single week between Bristol and London, and I would go with my bike to get on the coach. And it would require an argument between me and the bus driver every single Monday morning, this was, because I would go, about taking my bike on board. The driver would say, no, you can't bring that on board. There's either no space or there's some issue with putting it on board. And I would have to argue with him. And 2 minutes before departure, he would say, okay, just put it on. Fine, let's go. And I would do this every single week. And that, is not building. I'm not thinking, hey, this is a great experience. I wish I could do this more. I'm thinking this is a nightmare. I want to do this less. And so for something like that, we're just taking this kind of pain point from the industry, and the industry doesn't have like the motivation internally to change. We're saying from a consumer perspective, how do you make that easy? And so for us, one of the first things we did actually when we were building Ember OS and building our product proposition was, if you want to book a bike on, then you just click. You literally click and then you choose a bike and then you're booked. And it's as simple as that. And you can do that. You don't need to do that, an hour in advance or a day in advance. You can do that right before the coach is leaving. It's a real-time system. It's a small but very real pain point, I would say, for cyclists. And there's loads and loads of examples like that exist within the industry. But I think the industry is led by companies that have been coach operators or bus operators for many years. And they think about it from a bus operator perspective. They don't think about it as like, what is it actually like to sit in a coach? Like, how does it feel when your knees are getting crushed by the seat in front of you?
Yeah.
How do you solve all of those kind of pain points and bring it together? I think that's what causes our passengers to often feel like when they get on board, we don't solicit for feedback from passengers, because I personally find that quite annoying. But we get loads of inbound emails from people saying, I've just traveled with you and it's really, really great. I can't believe it. I'm going to be using it and I'm going to tell all of my friends. And in a way, that gives us like a huge amount of confidence that we're doing the right thing and solving these pain points.
Right. And you have some experience of these pain points having been on lots of buses over your life. Where are you from, Keith? I'm not hearing a Scottish accent.
No, that's true. I moved to Scotland to start this business. So I sort of have lived in a few different places. So I grew up in England, but have lived abroad, lived in California, lived in France and Austria, and kind of have spent quite a lot of time abroad. So I would say my accent is a little bit mixed, but also a little bit generic. But specifically, my business partner grew up in Edinburgh, so he's from Edinburgh. And we decided, for strategic reasons, actually, that Edinburgh would be a great place to come and start the business.
So Edinburgh was sort of strategic, but Scotland, because your co-founder was from there and it kind of made sense? Or, I mean, I imagine there was more to it than that.
Yeah, it's always funny when you hear like the genesis stories from different companies. I listen to a lot of podcasts with other founders. And, there is always a reason, you're right. But sometimes the reason is not as, let's say, well thought through or as dramatic as you might think. In our particular case, we were looking at launching two routes when we were going to start the business. One of them was in the south of England. One of them was in Scotland. And that was because I had kind of more familiarity with that sort of Bristol region because I was living in Bristol and London at the time. And Pierce had his experience of growing up in Edinburgh and using all of the buses around Edinburgh as well. And so we were looking at those two things. Specifically, though, what ended up making the decision of why Scotland is that Scotland was at the time looking like the more progressive government for its net zero targets and ambitions. It not only had a net zero target of 2045 instead of 2050, but it actually also had this really great goal, which I thought was great at the time, of reducing car kilometers by 20% by 2030. And if you want to reduce car kilometers by 20%, like how do you do that? Well, you have to get people out of cars somehow. And the only way you're going to get people out of cars is by giving them an alternative, which is as good as or better than their car. And when we were thinking about what is Ember going to be to people as we scale up and as we build a network, well, it's going to be that real car alternative. That's what we're building the product proposition to be. So we felt very aligned with what the government was intending to do. They've actually rode back from that target now because it turns out it's quite hard. We're still doing our part to reduce those car kilometers, and we're scaling up a lot, which is giving people that opportunity to travel with us. But it was that kind of convergence of factors actually which led us to come here.
And where does the name Ember come from?
It doesn't come from somewhere very, very specific. We had a few different options when we were looking to launch the business. But I think the reason that we chose Ember in the end was that, one, it's relatively short. It has the sound, like that M sound is kind of something that we wanted in there because it's quite a soft sound. We wanted to have that kind of the softness in the name. And it also, in a way, was like its representation. If you think about the coach industry and the embers of the industry and the kind of the dying of an industry, it was a slight reference to that. And I later found out it actually means human in Hungarian, which I didn't know at the time, but I thought that was also quite a nice reference.
Huh. Okay. That's really interesting. The embers of a dying industry that you're sort of remaking or rebuilding? The Purpose Pioneers is supported by Triodos Bank. I've been a customer of theirs for several years now, and I have to say, my experience has always been pretty seamless. Their app is secure and easy to use, and whenever I've needed help with something, their customer service has always been great. The best part, though, is that they're totally transparent about what they invest in. They don't fund harmful industries, so I know my money is only being used to support positive things like renewable energy, social housing, or community projects. Visit triodos.co.uk to find out more about the power of moving your money. So Keith, in the Purpose Pioneers, we ask everyone to share 3 key defining moments that are centered around discovering their sense of purpose and putting it into practice. So for you, was there a tipping point or a trigger that kind of spurred you and your co-founder Pierce into action to create Ember?
Yeah, I would say that there was a tipping point. I think tipping point is maybe a nice way of phrasing it, because it wasn't a big bang moment. It wasn't like, we just suddenly woke up and we thought, oh my God, we've got to do this. From today, life has changed. It was kind of an accumulation over years, actually, of thinking about, both refining our general skills, putting those skills into practice in kind of previous roles and previous businesses that we've scaled. And then also kind of becoming aware enough as kind of product people of where you can actually go out and do something. And I think that the final tipping point in a way for Pierce and I was that, we'd been working in a previous startup for 6, nearly 7 years. And both independently actually had decided it's probably time to kind of move on. And both of us had this strong feeling that we definitely wanted to do our own thing. And it was funny because I remember at the time, we hadn't talked to each other about this. And then I went and said to him, look, I need to tell you something. I'm thinking of leaving. It's going to be super difficult. I don't think the founders are going to like this. And he said to me, oh, that's awkward because I'm about to tell them the same thing.
Right.
And so it was kind of that convergence. And in a way, that was one of the tipping points that we said, well, if we both kind of have reached that conclusion independently, we both we have that intrinsic motivation that this is the thing that we want to do. Why don't we kind of work on something together? We knew that we could work together really, really well. And that's when we started thinking about, okay, well, what is it that we can do? And we started looking for different opportunities. We wanted to find something that was meaningful from a kind of, for the world, I guess what's less interesting for us, to be honest, would be going and starting a hedge fund or going and starting something which is like, building financial instruments and just making a load of money from doing that. It doesn't feel like you're doing something. So I think we had this really strong sense we want to do something where you feel the tangible impacts of it. And we wanted to feel that in the short term. Some of the other businesses, actually, we talked about, we were thinking of launching electric planes at one point. And electric planes, I remember having the conversation with Pierce because he had just got his pilot's license. And the thing that held me back from actually committing to that idea was that I don't think we would have seen the impact of it for at least 10 years. And that's not to say that it's not worth doing. It absolutely is worth doing. But I think we wanted something specifically that you could see the benefit from almost from day one. You're not waiting for this kind of cliff edge function of seeing lots and lots of benefit. You're incrementally making like the change, and you're giving people like a way that they can also make the change, and you can kind of build on that. So it's that kind of tipping point came, I guess, from multiple vectors, accumulated, realized suddenly it converged, and we had this forcing function of, hey, we're going to actually do something. Let's do something together. He was the right person that I knew that we could work with for the next 20 years. I've got kind of no issues saying that. And so it became like an easy thing to commit to. And then that's where we started really drilling down into different ideas.
You launched Ember during the pandemic. What was that like?
Well, we were due to launch the business on March the 1st, 2020. And yeah, I'm sure everyone can remember what it was like in March 2020 when the UK went into lockdown. And so going back a few months before that, in December 2019 and January 2020, our first 2 vehicles that we'd bought were being produced in China. And we were starting to hear about the factories closing, and there was something that was spreading in China, and it wasn't really clear to us, but we were told that, there might be a delay to your vehicle arriving into the UK. And then, a few months later, I guess COVID got spread to the whole world. And that's when we kind of decided that maybe March the 1st wasn't actually the best time ever to launch the business. One, the vehicles hadn't arrived, and two, the world was changing. So we pushed back the launch date to October the 1st, 2020. And in a way, actually, it wasn't ideal for us, because 2 weeks after launching the business in Scotland, it became illegal to travel on our routes unless you were effectively a key worker. So in terms of that early hype, excitement, you're trying to build passengers, you're trying to get the name and the brand out there. We didn't do any of that because it just didn't make sense. We did run services. We ran every single day. We have run services every single day since October the 1st, 2020. And we did that to support key workers. We did have some people traveling, the people who absolutely had to travel for their roles. We were able to provide transport for them. And so whilst we weren't able to start growing the business and getting people in as we wanted, what we were able to do, what we spent a lot of time, was how do we embed and achieve operational excellence from the outset? How do we make sure the things that we're doing are running hyper efficiently? How do we make sure that we're not, in a way, you have in us, and on my previous startup experience, when you're scaling quickly and you're kind of acquiring passengers, you end up putting a lot of hacky processes in sometimes. And we didn't have that pressure because we didn't have many passengers. And so instead of having the hacky processes, we started really thinking about, okay, what should the system be doing here? How should we be building the system, the actual architecture, the kind of foundational level? How should we be building that so it's really good and it's ready to scale and it's resilient? All of those things. So we spent probably the first 18 months really, really focused on that.
It was a benefit to have that kind of slow pace in the beginning.
I think it was, I guess we made it a benefit. I'm not sure that I would want to kind of necessarily do it exactly like that again. But I think what it allowed us to do was be very purposeful with what we wanted to do. And I think that we still remain purposeful about what we work on and what we don't work on. We're very cognizant of the fact that you can't take on all of the challenges in a business, and you can't make sure everything is going to work really well because you have limited capacity. And you have limited capacity as an individual, but also as a team. And I think, therefore, we've been very purposeful about what we've worked on. And COVID, in a way, was a forcing function for that. But that has given us just this really strong foundation for the platform.
Mm-hmm. And did you have some investment in the early days, loans, or how did you kind of maintain since things were kind of going at a slower pace than you'd anticipated?
Yeah. So I guess that's one of the critical things when you start a business. You need to fund it from somewhere. And one of the challenges of our business model is that you can't fund it all from raising equity, because a coach is a relatively expensive asset. And I guess Pierce and I had been working specifically in business lending for several years before this. And so we knew what that market looked like. We had an understanding of kind of what lenders want to see before they lend. And we knew this was going to be a big challenge, but I think because we've been in the industry, we kind of backed ourselves to be able to figure it out. And so we did do a very small equity raise at the very beginning. We had some investment from friends and family who wanted to kind of give us a good launch point. And Pierce and I also put money into the business at the beginning. We were fortunate that we could do that. But what we couldn't do was we couldn't pay for coaches. We didn't have enough cash to be able to pay for 2 coaches. And that's where we went looking to be able to raise debt. And there, I think we got very, very, very lucky. And I'm very grateful, actually, that we managed to get lucky there, because I approached Triodos Bank, and I did it actually via LinkedIn. I sent an email to the CEO of Triodos Bank on LinkedIn. And it was one of those things that you send it, you're really hoping for the best. And I got a response. And when I got a response, I was like, okay, great. And then he put me in touch with somebody else in the bank. And that person then took the time to kind of understand what we're doing. Because in a way, it sounds completely mad. If you take it to like a traditional credit underwriter and you say, hey, we want to borrow £500,000 to buy 2 electric coaches that no one has ever operated before, that have no track record. And by the way, we're not from this industry and we've never done this before. And what we're doing, we're not even sure if it's going to work. That's a difficult pitch.
Very, yeah.
And lots of people did say no to us. But Triodos got behind it. they understood both the impact of what we were trying to do, but also I think they quite liked like the aspiration of what we were trying to do. And so they did fund those first 2 vehicles and actually went on to fund 38 vehicles in the end, and also funded some of our development works for building charging hubs. So I think we got super lucky to find the right people and the right institution that could help us scale over the first few years.
Keith, what stresses you out? What part of the business now is kind of you're spending a lot of time on?
I guess in a way, like mess stresses me out, and things not being either well ordered or well thought through. But there is like a big but within that. I'm very cognizant of the fact that in any scaling business, you will always have to accept some level of mess. I think that by its nature needs to just be part of it. And there are different ways of kind of thinking about how you kind of sandbox that, or how you kind of protect against that becoming an overwhelming feeling of firefighting, because you don't want everyone to have that feeling all the time of like everything's a mess, but you also need to be focused on building for the long term. And I think what we have very intrinsically actually in the business is this feeling of long-termism and building for the long term. I'm much, much less concerned actually about the next 6 months as I am the next 10 years or the next 20 years. And I guess we've always got one eye in each of these 2 time horizons to be thinking about what do we need to do to ease the mess like right now. But we can't spend all of our time on that because we need to be continuing to build the foundations for the 10-year, 20-year. Actually, someone was telling me earlier today about the 3-century business, which is kind of a Chinese philosophy that your business should span 3 different centuries.
Wow.
Which I quite like actually as an aspiration. But you have to be thinking long term at the same time. And often that can feel like you're going slowly. So if I think about like maybe, what have we actually achieved or what have we rolled out in the last 2 months, it can feel slow because you're not seeing the immediate effect of those things. But when you put lots of different 2-month periods together, and then you say, have we felt the impact of that 5 years later? It's like this real compounding effect of the benefit. And I think that has been our approach. So I'm not like super stressed about anything in particular, I would say. I'm not easily stressed as a person.
So we're on to your second defining moment, Keith. So this time I'd like to ask you about something unexpected or joyful that sort of indicated to you that your work was really having an impact. Is there anything like that springs to mind?
Yeah, there's a few different things actually that spring to mind. So we talked a bit about when we launched the business in 2020, we had, next to no passengers. And so every passenger was super valuable to us. And we saw like a booking come over, we're like, yes, we've got a passenger. It's great. And since then, our passenger numbers have gone up. So, now roughly we've got around 50 to 60,000 passengers traveling a week with us. And what was quite cool to see, where I see kind of these moments that give me joy, are kind of the feedback from those passengers, but also the silent feedback that we get. And because we had our 5-year anniversary last year, I actually looked up from those passengers who started traveling with us in late 2020, are they still actually using our service? And what was really fun actually was that a bunch of them was not only still traveling with us, but they were traveling with us on their actual like 5-year anniversary dates. And when we look back through their kind of Ember history, they are regular users. They've traveled with us hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And in a way, they're not getting in touch with us and they're not saying, oh, Ember is the best. But I can see that they think we're the best because they're still traveling with us. They're making this silent choice that we are the best kind of mode of transport for their journey. And that's something that we can see in our data in a way, like a silent validation of what we're doing is actually really good. But then on the other side of that, there's kind of more public showings of affection, shall we say, for Ember, which they are these like small moments of joy. And one that comes to mind actually is that up in Dundee, one of our bus stops is right next to a post box. And one morning we got a photo. I saw a photo posted of this post box, and on top of it was kind of one of these like tea cozies that you see sometimes knitted, that people knit and put on a post box, but it had an Ember bus on it. And it was like, where has that come from? And the people were sending it to us saying, oh, that's a great marketing strategy. You guys have done that. And I was like, we haven't done that. That's not something that we're trying to like lay claim for. Some fan has just knitted that and actually put it on the post box, which I thought was really fun.
Yeah. And I guess you weren't really expecting to have fans so much, or, people developing affection and making knitted things for your company.
No. And like similarly, we saw a photo that a cake maker posted up on their Facebook page, which we got tagged in, and they had made an Ember coach cake for some child that we don't know who just wanted an Ember bus cake for their birthday. So it's really nice to see that, because in a way, I guess what we're trying to like get across to people is that, we're trying to build this better, bus but better, we call it, this better transport experience for people. And I think when people feel that, they do have an affinity for it. It's kind of unexpected. And so they build that affinity and that joy with using it and seeing it. And that's really nice.
We've arrived at the third defining moment on your journey with Ember so far, which is to reflect on an experience that has given you a kind of glimpse of the future, or a sort of vision of where your work could lead. So what has given you a taste of the future?
And I guess where I see like the kind of the taste of the future thing, the way I think about that is that what we have as Ember today in many ways is not our vision. It's not our vision of like what Ember is going to be, clearly, because the vision of building Ember is going to take more time. You can't just build something overnight. It's really hard to build infrastructure quickly. It's hard to have a business that is in the real world that moves very, very quickly. But what I would say is that I have this kind of deep faith in kind of putting together the different building blocks in this kind of full stack approach of going beyond incremental change and reaching a solution which is just like far, far better. It's almost like a paradigm shift, actually, in whatever problem that you're trying to solve. And I think there's plenty of examples in other industries and other companies where people have done that. And to me, it's like this convergence of understanding, like, what is the technology capable of? Where are we in our technology cycle? What do we need to do to kind of unlock the benefits of that? How do you put all of these component parts together to then actually drive that paradigm shift? And it's a bit like a kind of scientific method, actually. So a bit like, how do you think about the advancement of science? Or if you think about epistemology and about like that knowledge acquisition, there is a process to that. And so that's what we're trying to do at Ember. And I guess the glimpse of the future that I can see is that for all the different things that we are working on as a business, I can see how every single one of those things can be like 10 or 100 times better. And in my mind, I sort of can then easily somehow like I can multiply all of these 10 or 100x things together so that it's like, these numbers are a bit ridiculous now, but 1,000,000 times better. Just as an example. And so I think that's where I see this vision of the future, like coming together. It's not that you need like a single individual leap. So like if I was working on nuclear fusion or something and suddenly there was just like easy to generate power for the whole world, I mean, that would be absolutely awesome. And I actually think that's a super interesting thing to work on. If I wasn't doing Ember, maybe I would do that.
Okay.
But Ember as a business, I think what it's trying to do is put together lots and lots of these like small things in lots of different directions to achieve something somewhat similar, I suppose, as an outcome.
I feel like you could start your own consulting business.
No, definitely. I'm not going to.
To help others to thrive.
There's not enough time for that. You're asking about free time.
Yeah, no time. Fair enough. Keith, this has been an absolutely fascinating conversation. Thank you so much for joining the Purpose Pioneers.
Appreciate it.
And a special thanks to our sponsor, Triodos Bank. We'll see you all next time.